I know that's a lot and that there are a lot of variables, but if you can just control as many of those as possible, then when things do go wrong, you're going to have a lot easier of a time to pinpoint those kind of uncontrollable ones. We are really putting these mics to the test today because if you can't tell, Finn has the zoomies, and unfortunately the only toy I brought is this like plasticky one. And there's a lot of road noise this morning, so I'm gonna have to hold it really close when I talk so that I can try and cancel out that extra noise in editing. God. I have needed to make this video for so long now because I get so many messages of people needing help troubleshooting their casting, which I never mind helping, but it saves me from repeating the same thing over and over again. And if you decide to start teaching yourself how to cast and you see this video, then you'll just automatically be able to troubleshoot your castings from the get-go. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Adriana. I have my jewelry business that I've been running for the last 4 years. I've been full-time for a year, and I've been casting for going on 2 years now. I can't believe it's already been 2 years since I started casting. I did start casting for other jewelers for a little while as well. I did that for about maybe 8 months, nearly a year. I think October would have been a year. And I recently stopped casting for other people because I opened a jewelry studio here in Pocatello, Idaho. So if you are wanting to learn how to cast and you feel like you need in-person help, you want to just get all of the info over with in one weekend or in a 2-day weekday class, then you can come to my jewelry studio. I am offering in-person classes now. I have 4 student benches. You can only see 2 of the 4 right here. And then I have my whole casting setup in here as well. So I do have a dedicated casting class now available for signups. You can go to my website, and at the top it says classes in one of the menu items, and I've got every class that I offer. I have stone setting, casting, wax carving, casting stones in place. I'm going to try and create some other classes as well to kind of rotate throughout the season. So let me know if there's anything that you don't see that you specifically want to see. But anyway, I'm in East Idaho, Pocatello. If you also want to come shop for jewelry in person, I'll be open Fridays and Saturdays. And yeah, let's get into the troubleshooting video if you are a self-starter and you just need a little help. I would say one of the most common problems that people come to me with is that their item didn't fill all the way, like maybe it stopped halfway through the band, or a lot of them didn't fill, or for whatever reason it just didn't come full circle, literally. And there are a few things that can be wrong, and so for a few of these troubleshooting items, there's always going to be a varying cause. So I'm just going to go through what it could be and what I normally tell people. The first thing that I always ask people is what their metal temperature was, because usually it's not hot enough. So for silver, I cast at 1,780 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes I pour a little bit colder at 1775, 1770. If you're cast it and fill all the way, then maybe look at what your temperature is. For gold, 10 karat and 14 karat gold, those are only 2 carats of gold that I've ever cast in. I cast at 1,780 degrees. 85 degrees, 1,785 degrees. The rule of thumb is that you usually want to cast about 100 degrees above the melting point. So if you ever forget what temperature to melt, just Google the melting point of your metal, add 100 degrees to that, and that's a really good starting point. That's one of the reasons that I really like using the melting furnaces and not using a crucible with a flame. You don't know what temperature that metal is. I just feel like it gives you one more variable that you don't need, you know? I do get though that some of those can be really expensive, or when you're just starting out and you want to be on a budget and that those crucibles are a lot cheaper, then absolutely use the crucible and just, you're going to have to tweak. But if you have room in your budget to get something affordable like the 2-auto one from Amazon, I think I have it linked in my storefront as well. I like to use the tilt-a-pour, the one from Pepe Tools, because you just pick it up and you pour. Another reason that your metal might not be hot enough, even though your melting temperature says that it's hot enough, is because you're pouring too slowly. I did that a lot in the beginning whenever I was using my 2-auto one. It's the one that you have to pick up the crucible, like actually take it out of the unit and pour. It's like glowing red. It always made me nervous, and so I poured really slowly, and you would be really surprised at how quickly metal can cool. So that also can be the problem. If you are using a melting furnace that you take the crucible out, just make sure that you're pouring like safely but kind of quickly. If your metal temperature is good and you feel like you're pouring at like a decent speed, then I always have people pressure test their vacuum table. If you're using a vacuum system, it's usually a lot easier to to do it that way. First off, you want to actually pay attention to your pressure gauge. Is it going up to the full pressure that you need it? Mine, because I live in Idaho above sea level, mine usually goes to about 27, and that's normal for me where I am. Make sure your vacuum table is working. Another way that you can pressure test your vacuum table without having an actual flask to set in there, your vacuum table should come with a silicone flask that has just a little hole at the top for non-perforated flasks. So just take that silicone mat, set it on top of your casting chamber, and put your finger over the hole, turn your unit on and onto the casting chamber, and it should draw a full suction. If it doesn't, then something is wrong. And maybe when you're casting, you're so focused on your flask that you're not really looking at the pressure gauge or if it's actually pulling a suction. Another thing that's happened to me with it not pulling a suction, and in the moment I'm like, why? What's happening? And you're panicking because this is hot and it needs to stay hot. You want to make sure that when you're pouring your investment into your flask that you're not getting any sort of drips on the edge of the flask, the side that ends up upside down and on top of your silicone gasket or your graphite gasket, whichever one you're using, although you should get graphite gaskets because they last a lot longer. But you want to make sure that you don't have any drips of investment on there because that will keep you from creating a good seal. So every time I pour my investment before I leave it to harden, I always wipe off the rim if I see anything sitting there because that will mess up your good seal. Also, I feel like I should have prefaced this in the beginning, but I'm talking about wax casting with all of this stuff. I've cast resin once, but it is completely different than casting wax. So this might all vary based on what you're casting. Another thing that can cause your cast not to fill is if your flask is too cold when you pour in your metal. You need a good hot flask to help that metal travel all the way through. So every time I cast, no matter what I am casting, I'm leaving my flask at 1,000 degrees for at least 45 minutes to an hour, ideally an hour before you cast, so that the inside is at that 1,000 degrees. If you're casting at anything less than that, then you might get an incomplete fill. Another problem that you could be having is that you're using sprues that are too small for that particular piece. You want to have a really good size sprue comparison to your ring. So for me, if I have a thick ring like a signet ring or like my dome ring, I'm going to use a 6-gauge sprue because you want a nice big opening to fill all of that metal. If I'm casting something smaller like my ojito ring, I use an 8-gauge sprue. But you wouldn't want to use an 8-gauge sprue on this ring because your gate won't be big enough. And so if your gate's not big enough, then the metal that needs to travel through this ring is going to travel really slowly, which means it's going to start cooling about halfway through or less, and you don't get a complete fill. So if you're casting large items, you really need to use a larger sprue. I haven't really found the need to go above a 6-gauge sprue. I don't think I've ever used anything above a 6-gauge sprue. So you're either going to use a 6-gauge or just add another sprue so that there's another point of contact. So for example, with this ring, just one good 6-gauge sprue and you should be good to go. So make sure you are sizing up your sprues when you need to. The next problem that people come to me about is porosity. If you don't know what porosity is, it's like little holes or cavities in your jewelry. They can be really, really tiny, and sometimes they can be kind of big. So the main thing that I find when you get porosity is that you had an air bubble that you didn't see or that you didn't notice. So before you go sending your pieces off to be cast, or before you cast your pieces, you want to hold it up to the light and spin it and make sure that you don't see any bubbles. If you do not pop and fill those bubbles with wax, then when it goes and gets vacuumed under the table, under that really strong suction, it will burst that bubble, fill with investment, and then it'll burn out that way and you'll have a cavity right there. So that's usually the number one culprit of porosity I find, is that there was an air bubble that you didn't know about. Another thing that can be in there is debris. So make sure that your wax pens are really clean whenever you're creating your rings. Sometimes, like whenever people would send me wax, I would notice that there would be a lot of black burnt bits in their like model, and a lot of that can turn into porosity because it doesn't burn away the same as wax. So you want to make sure that you're keeping your pins clean. I've recently started keeping some steel wool on my table, and I just put my pin in it and I just go back and forth and it cleans it really well. And so yeah, keep your pins clean. The next issue is gas porosity, and there are a few things that can cause gas porosity. If you don't know what that looks like, it looks like a bunch of like tiny pinholes kind of bunched together in one area, almost like a sponge-like surface. It's a bunch of little teeny tiny holes, and you will know they're they're a bitch. The main cause I find of gas porosity is that your metal was too hot when you pour it. If your metal is way too hot, you will get gas porosity somewhere in the process. The next one that I've noticed is improper sprue placement. If you're placing your sprue on a really, like the thinnest part of your ring or your earring or whatever you're casting, you will get gas porosity around the thicker areas. So you want to always make sure that you are spruing to the thickest point of your ring or earring or whatever you're casting. If you put it on the skinniest, like let's say I had this big signet ring and I had the band super dainty, like this ring, but the top of it was like big and signety, you know? I am going to get porosity on the face if I put the band right here on the bottom. So you usually want to either stick it on the face if you don't have texture, or curve your sprue and stick it underneath. I try not to curve my sprues. I don't like doing that, but it does work. I just find that it's not as consistent. Like, I've had bands not fill, so you want to just be careful with that. If I can, I like to just stick things on the face. If it's a smooth surface, just stick it to the thickest part, and that will help you not get porosity. I'll try and put a picture in here, but I ran a little trial, and yeah. I'll show you right here. You'll see what I mean. The next thing that can cause porosity is having dirty or contaminated metal. So if you are recycling some used jewelry for your casting, you want to make sure you're always using at least half and half casting grain and half recycled jewelry, because you can get porosity from all of the oxides and like dirt on used jewelry. So if you don't have casting grain and you're in a pickle and you are needing to use something completely recycled, then you want to just make sure you clean it really, 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 really well. Clean it, pickle it, ultrasonic it, tumble it, whatever you need to do, get it really nice and clean. But ideally you want to use half casting grain and half recycled material. So that's another thing that can cause porosity. Another thing that can cause porosity is having too much water in your investment. If you're not using the proper ratios, which I believe I use 40 to 100. 40 to 100, there's a chart, I'll try and put it here, but that's what I like to use. If you put too much water, you're going to have a lot of excess moisture. Whenever you go and pour in your metal, it's going to create a little bit of steam in there, and it's going to create that texture on your jewelry. So make sure you're not using too much water and you're following those ratios to a T. It's also a good example of why it's really important to have a good burnout schedule. There are ramp rates for a reason and different temperatures to be held at certain times for a reason, because you need those lower temperatures to burn away all of that moisture. Like for example, my first few temperatures, like at 300 degrees, I think it gets held for an hour, and then it goes to 400 degrees for I believe an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, but that's when all of that steam is slowly removed. If you are removing it too quickly, like let's say you're going from 300, skipping 400 and going straight to 700, you might not be able to remove all of that wax well, because it's not just the hot temperature that removes all of the wax, it's the steam combined with the hot temperature. So if you're skipping that steam out phase, then you might still have some like wax that's in there that didn't get burned out properly. So that's another thing that can cause porosity. So I know it can feel frustrating when you're having issues and it could be 10 different things, but if you're doing 5 of them correctly and you know that you are, then it kind of narrows it in, you know? Another problem is if you're getting surface roughness, not rustness. If you have a lot of rough texture on the surface, then that's usually a burnout issue. Like I said, maybe you're ramping it up a little too fast, and that steam, instead of slowly steaming out and removing the wax really nicely, it's like boiling in there, and you end up creating a lot of rough textures. It also can come from not mixing your investment properly. I know a lot of people mix it by hand, and that's totally fine. Just make sure you're mixing it really well. I really like using just a little like kitchen mixer, and I always feel really confident in how well my stuff is mixed because of that. And it saves you some elbow grease. If you find that you are having weak points in your casting or any cracks or anything, that can come from quenching your flask a little too early. I usually like to wait about 2 to 3 minutes, or at least until the button stops glowing, before I quench my flask. And it's okay to have like a little bit of a thermal shock to your jewelry as long as there's no gemstones cast in places. in there. But if you go straight from pouring directly into the water right after, then you are going to thermal shock it in a way that it might damage the actual castings inside. So just wait for the button to stop glowing, like the actual button of metal on top of the flask to stop glowing, and then you are free to quench it. If you're noticing any sort of like dips in your casting right where the sprue kind of meets the metal, then that's again going to be a spruing issue. Like I said, if you're using a sprue or like a gate that's too small, then that metal's going to start to cool as it starts to come around the ring, and it's going to cool right when it comes back to make full circle, and it will sometimes create a little dent or a little concave, and you'll notice after you cast, your sprue is like barely hanging on because it took all of that metal flowing through it that it almost didn't have anything left to like come back and fill the sprue. So if you got a weak sprue after casting and then you've got a dip in your ring, then that means you did not use a sprue that was big enough, so size up. I know that's a lot and that there are a lot of variables, but if you can just control as many of those as possible, then when things do go wrong, you're gonna have a lot easier of a time to pinpoint those kind of uncontrollable ones. So make sure you're always measuring really well with your water, that you're always sticking to the same burnout schedule with that ending pour time. Like again, like I said, I've always had really good success with 1,000 degrees for 45 minutes to an hour. The larger your flask, you want to lean more toward the hours side, but control as many things that you can control. Always use 50 casting grain and 50% recycled if you're going to use recycled stuff. Like control as many things as you can, and it'll be a lot easier to figure out when things go wrong, because things will go wrong. It happens to me still, it happens to everyone. So when things go wrong, move on, just keep going, don't let it scar you. I know from personal experience that when you have a big casting mess up, it can kind of mentally affect your next casting where you almost feel nervous. You're like, fuck, I hope that doesn't happen again. So just know it's normal, it happens to all of us, but hopefully this list of things can help you figure out what happened, what went wrong, or keep you from making some of those mistakes. So if you have any questions, or if you have anything, any advice that you want to give on casting, if you've been casting longer than me, or if you've got any other like troubleshooting things, if this then that, please put it in the comments. It really, really helps everyone just get better. If you are wanting to learn in person, or you want to get like a hands-on feel for it before you start buying equipment and deciding if this is something you really want to get into, then come take a class with me. I'm in East Idaho. I'm actually not too far from Yellowstone National Park. I'm about 2 hours and 45 minutes. So if you want to take a class with me on a Wednesday and a Thursday, and then stay here over the weekend and rent a car and drive to Yellowstone, drive to Teton National Park, go to Salt Lake City, maybe pair it up with some kind of camping trip or something. This part of Idaho is really nice, and it snows in the wintertime too. So if you want to come see some snow around November, maybe late October, then come take a class, come visit, come say hi. If you don't want to come take a class, but you want to come say hello, you want to come see the studio, please, please, please do. I welcome anyone in here, even if you're not coming to buy jewelry, please come say hello. I'm at 228 North Main Street in Pocatello. I will have my doors open Fridays and Saturdays starting ideally September 5th of this year. So come say hello. I'm almost done with the studio. I've got all my student benches set up. I still need to make stock and fix up my ugly display case. It needs a lot of work. It still needs to be stained and painted and all of that stuff. I'll have the link to my class list in the description, but I hope this video helped you. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. It helps my channel grow. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.